Alright, what is up guys? Mad Notes here, and today I'm starting my playthrough of Metal Gear Solid 5. So, a lot to talk about with this game. Let's go ahead and start with what we're looking at here. So this is MGS5 Ground Zeroes, and what this was basically a glorified demo that came out about, I want to say like 6 to 8 months maybe before the release of the actual game. And basically what it was like a prequel side mission to sort of, I guess its intention was to sort of get players acclimated to the way MGS5 plays compared to the other games in the series, and just kind of to show off the graphic engine, Fox engine, which is pretty amazing, I thought anyway. And yeah, just a way for fans to get to experience the game early, a little earlier, because the main game itself had sort of run into some delays, which I'll talk about later. But the reason why this particular demo, I guess you could say, was so controversial was twofold. One, it got a lot of shit for being incredibly short. You can actually get through the main, I guess, story of the demo in about, I don't know, 10. I mean, you can do it super fast, but you can just normally casually playing it, probably do it in about 20 to 30 minutes maybe. There are like little extra side missions you can do, one of which sounds really cool, that was exclusive to the Xbox version, where you could play as Raiden, doing sort of like a mission, like Invasion of the Body Snatchers is what I understood it to be, kind of like. And the one that was exclusive to the PS4 version was sort of like a flashback, in a sense, like you do these sort of missions that lined up with Metal Gear Solid 1, and you'd get these little like flashback cutscenes where you'd see the old Snake pixel model or polygon model. It's not a sprite, but it damn near looks like one. And from what I read, they actually took out the exclusivity, so that both of those are on here, I assume. So I'm probably gonna play through all of it just to get the full experience. So yeah, I got a lot of shit for that. And the second thing I got a lot of shit for was the price of it. When it came out, it was 40 bucks, and I'm pretty sure I was so excited for this game that I got it while it was still that price. Totally not worth $40 for sure, but I can see why the game got a lot of shit for that. Who do you blame for this? I would imagine it's tough to say. It's probably more Konami's fault for wanting to get part of the game out sooner, before it was finished. One of the aspects of this game that, one of the many controversial aspects of this game is sort of the changes going on in Konami's corporate structure while this game was in development, and how the huge falling out with Hideo Kojima, obviously, who's the creator of the Metal Gear Solid franchise. I believe there was budget concerns that the game was sort of costing a little too much, to the point where there was supposedly sort of extra missions, extra scenes that were left on the cutting room floor. From what I understand, this game has kind of a lackluster ending that sort of happens kind of quickly, like halfway through the actual game, and that there's quite a bit of padding, in a sense. You sort of repeat missions with different variables added in, having to perfectly sneak through it and shit like that, not killing anybody, probably things like that. And so apparently there was extra shit that was supposed to be in the game that is not in the game, which is really sad to hear. So that might sort of affect the way I do this playthrough. I don't know if I'll play the entire thing or if I'll stop once maybe the sort of midpoint resolution sort of concludes. It just depends how much I'm feeling the game at that point. But yeah, that was sort of the tip of the iceberg of the controversy surrounding the game. So let's go ahead and talk about Metal Gear Solid, the series as a whole. Obviously, like I said, it's created by Hideo Kojima, and I talked a little bit about this in my Dark Souls intro about how he's sort of one of these devs that people took notice of his work, you know, beyond just like, okay, let me put it this way. When I was a teenager, I was really starting to get into movies and looking at them more than just a movie, you know, and a viewing experience. You know, you started to think about and appreciate the people involved, the directors, the writers, and you started to become more interested, or at least as interested, in the process of creation as much as the finished product. You know, the stories behind how things are developed are almost as interesting as the final product itself. And naturally that sort of progressed to being fans of development houses and to you know, the developers themselves, you know, the project leads, and Kojima's no exception. I think what it was, at least in my opinion, what's interesting about him is sort of the mixture of like cinematic storytelling combined with just like cool, you know, action set pieces, and the quirky sense of humor, I feel like, are sort of his hallmarks and what I really enjoyed about his games. So I never played any of the original, the MSX or the NES version, so I'm going to skip over those. Let's start with Metal Gear Solid 1 on the PS1. I remember just that game being so huge for people. Obviously, I was never a Sony guy, so I had a 64 at the time. So I remember kind of just brushing it off, like, yeah, well, you know, I got Ocarina of Time, so fuck y'all, you know. But I definitely remember wanting to like it. My best friend at the time had a PlayStation and really loved that game. And he had the action figure line by McFarlane Toys, which I thought was amazing. I was a huge fan of, you know, Todd McFarlane at that time, especially, and of all of his toy lines. And that was one of the really awesome ones. So I sort of started to appreciate the game first from that, because the characters look so cool. And I sort of started to become a fan of it from afar. Kind of in the same way that I became a huge fan of Resident Evil before I even got a chance to play any of the series, although I was like huge into the lore of that game even before I got a chance to play it. The first one obviously being on the 64, Resident Evil 2. I'll definitely talk about that once I do my playthrough of all those Resident Evil series. But yeah, so I never really understood too much. I could never really get into Metal Gear Solid 1 as much as I wanted because I couldn't actually play it. Years later, I remember when I had the Dreamcast and they came out with the Bleem, which was like a way to emulate certain PS1 games, and Metal Gear Solid 1 was one of those. I really, really wanted it, but they got fucking sued before Bleem could really get sort of mass produced, so I never really get a chance to play it then. The first time I don't even think I've ever actually even played the PS1 version. Years later, I was able to get Twin Snakes on GameCube, which I actually really liked. I know a lot of people that played the original don't like it, and for reasons that I totally understand why. But me being having never played the original, I thought it was awesome. I'd like to go back and beat it at some point. So that brings us to the original Xbox and Metal Gear Solid 2. So this was the first Metal Gear Solid game that I was going to be able to play. I remember when it got announced, I was so hyped for it. Uh, Going back a little bit, when Metal Gear Solid 2 first got released on PS2, I remember, being interested, seeing what the next chapter of the game, how it was going to be received, even though I couldn't actually play it. And I remember a huge backlash over that game because if you haven't played it, spoilers, you don't actually get to play as Solid Snake for the majority of the game. He's sort of in like the first, I would say, almost not even an hour in the game that he's in, and then you switch to Raiden, who at the time everyone decreed as this whiny bitch of a character, and he kind of definitely was. Once you play that game, though you do sort of kind of learn to at least kind of get used to the character and appreciate him a little bit. I think the thought process behind that was putting you in the seat of a weaker character was supposed to make Snake all the more legendary. Because he is in the game, you just don't actually get to play as him very much. And I can see how that, I can see that thought process, but to me it's just not, I just don't like it. The same thing they kind of did with Devil May Cry 4, giving you a character that's, at least in that game, he kind of looks similar to Dante, but just the character itself wasn't nearly as cool. And it's like, what's the point? Let us play as the character we want to play as, But I get what they're trying to go for. And the game itself is actually kind of insane. It's a huge game. It's got this huge convoluted story, but it's the thing about the Metal Gear Solid games is they're incredibly cinematic, and by the end of it you feel like you've been on this huge journey with the characters involved, and whether the gameplay is great throughout or the story is great throughout, by the end of it you feel some satisfaction, and you feel like you've been through this epic this epic story. And Metal Gear Solid 2 was a really awesome experience for me. I really liked that game a lot. So moving on to Metal Gear Solid 3, it's kind of a funny story how I actually first got a chance to play that game. So obviously it was years, not too long after the game came out, but years after the PS2 came out, because like I said, I've never been an early adopter of Sony. I've always gotten their consoles, way after the fact. But the way I got a chance to play it was, so McDonald's, they do these yearly like Monopoly games, right? And they have the little stickers on top of certain drinks and food and whatnot that you peel, and they're little game pieces, whatever. Well, that year they had essentially they were coupons for like $1 or $5, $10, $20 off at Best Buy. And I remember my mom loves McRibs, so they always had game pieces on the McRib cardboard boxes or whatever, and like on the drinks and shit. So I was collecting those for a while. I'd get $1 piece here and there, but not that much. Well, one day my dad comes home, and the one thing about my dad is he always comes home finding crazy shit, and he had this box, and we don't know what it was. I don't even think it had like McDonald's labeling on it, but we open it up and it's this huge stack of the McRib cardboard cases with Monopoly game pieces on each one. So I was like, holy shit, there's got to be like, I'm not even sure. I think actually like you were guaranteed $1 piece on each one. I forgot how it worked. Regardless, I peeled them all off and I ended up with like $150 worth of these pieces. So I was like, holy shit. I wasn't sure if like I wonder if they'll get suspicious if I take this mini over there. But it's like hey, I can just say I collected them from friends and family and whatnot. So I went over to Best Buy and I had like a fucking shopping spree off of this shit. I got Guitar Hero 2 with the guitar, obviously. I bought God of War, the first one. Uh, the whole Devil May Cry series. And oh, Shadow of the Colossus. And the last thing I got was Metal Gear Solid 3. And I was I wasn't sure what to expect with Part 3. I remember being excited to play it finally. Uh, I can't really remember the critical reception of that game. Somehow I feel like it's gotten people sort of have changed their opinion on it. Like it's a lot of people's favorite Metal Gear Solid. A lot of people say that now. At the time, I'm not sure if that was the case. Maybe it was. But I remember once I finally got to play it, I thought it was awesome. I loved it. Uh, the story, I really connected, with sort of Big Boss's mission, having to, seek out and kill his former friend and his former military leader, the boss. This badass older looking chick that sort of looks like I don't know. She kind of looks like Kate Blanchett. You know, she looks like that. But yeah, Metal Gear Solid 3 is pretty amazing. From the opening 007 inspired song, "What a Thrill." With darkness and silence through the night, and the boss fights with the end and the sorrow are amazing. Leading up to the final clash with the boss, with like all the cherry blossoms around. It's just really well done. It's an awesome game. It's been a long time since I played it. I'd love to go back and play it again. The probably main criticism of that game I have is how much of a bitch they turned Ocelot into. He's really, I remember him being really annoying and me really hating his character in that game, and not quite believing that he kind of grows up to be this badass character in the future. But that's a minor nitpick for sure. So Metal Gear Solid 4, once again I played it way after it came out. I think it was almost a launch title for the PS3. Um, so it was a long time after it came out that I finally got a chance to play it. Once again, I was really excited to finally get my hands on it though, and I know the criticisms put on that game were that it was like a big movie, like there wasn't a whole lot of gameplay segments. When I finally got to play it, I understood the criticisms. Uh, the gameplay, yeah, is sort of kind of few and far between, especially further into the game that you get. But if you're a fan of the series and you're a fan of all the lore, it's really not a chore to sit through, and it's a pretty fun game to play. Uh, Once again, you get interesting bosses to fight with. One thing the Metal Gear series has always done really well is awesome boss fights, and the sort of, I believe it's like 4 chicks, the 4 models that you fight are really awesome. Oh yeah, I remember really liking the chick with like the octopus arms, and I just had a lot of fun with the game. I probably One thing that kind of sucked about it is you're playing the whole game as Old Man Snake, and since I never really got to, play the first one when it came out, and I've always played these games late. Uh, it kind of sucked that I didn't really get to spend a whole lot of time playing as Solid Snake in his most badass, era, I guess, or his most badass look, or in a really awesome setting. You get that little brief part in part two, and Metal Gear Solid One, but no, mostly the Metal Gear games focus on Big Boss. And yeah, even though he's probably a more fleshed out character, uh, still you kind of want to be playing as like the quote unquote hero main character of the series. But other than that, I think Metal Gear Solid 4 is a really awesome game, and I'd love to go back and play through it again one day. So after that, even though these aren't necessarily part of the main storyline, um, I remember playing Revengeance, which has Raiden as your main character, and I really, really love that game. It's a lot of fun to play. It retroactively makes Metal Gear Solid 2 a lot better because you get to see, how this character's story is going to end up, and how he becomes such a fucking badass, Uh, and in a way, I don't think it justifies you playing as him throughout the majority of Metal Gear Solid 2, but he does become as cool, if not arguably cooler, than Solid Snake at some point, in his life in the future. So yeah, I really love that game. Uh, and I think that game and also the criticisms of 4 kind of indirectly sort of steered the direction of Metal Gear Solid 5, in that it's definitely more gameplay focused rather than story based, which is nice for I guess the mainstream or the majority of audiences. But as someone who really doesn't mind like the long cutscenes, and I don't mind sitting and watching the story play out, it's kind of a bummer that Metal Gear Solid 5 isn't more story focused. Um, I've actually played through like the first 3 hours or so of it, and there actually is a fair amount of story in it, but from what I can understand, it gets less and less as the game goes on, which is kind of a bummer. But the other side game that sort of leads directly into this is Peace Walker on PSP. Um, the game that I wish was on the PSP when it first came out, when I first originally had a PSP. I remember really wishing that there was a real Metal Gear game on the PSP when I first bought it. If you remember, there's I think it's called Metal Gear Acid or something like that. It's kind of like a card game, and I really wanted to like it a lot, but it was just kind of just super boring having to play a card game instead of a legit Metal Gear game. So way later, after I had already sold my PSP, I finally got to play it a little bit in the collection that came with part 2 and 3, and I kind of dug it. I really like the story more. I really like Paz as a character, and the whole premise of starting this army. It's essentially, gameplay-wise, sort of a precursor to Metal Gear Solid 5, in the sense that you're building Mother Base and Fultoning characters that you tranquilize or killed, not kill, but that you interact with during missions and shit to build up your base. And that's basically a core concept that's in Metal Gear Solid 5, is building Mother Base, which is a cool idea. I kind of like that. So as far as what I was talking about earlier with the controversy surrounding this game, like I said, Konami was going through sort of a corporate change, identity change. They're sort of moving away from wanting to make games, and we're focused, for at least for consoles anyway, and we're focusing on the mobile market, which is very big in Japan. and fucking pachinko machines, which is also very big, very lucrative in Japan. And so they did various things that didn't engender a lot of goodwill towards gamers, like canceling Silent Hills and apparently making life hard on Kojima during the making of this game. And like I said, pretty much it's been, you know, proven through data mining that there was supposed to be more of an ending to this game that was cut. I was thinking, well, maybe it was going to be cut later for like story DLC, but and we still haven't seen anything. So I don't know. Apparently, thinking that they're saving that for a future Metal Gear game, which they are currently making without Kojima, obviously. And let's get into that real quick. So he was essentially fired, but they didn't actually come out and say he was fired. They sort of tried to say that he was taking a leave of absence on vacation. But, you know, he was essentially fired, and they did some kind of petty things that pissed gamers off, like not letting him receive awards for the game. Like I said, they canceled Silent Hills, which he was working on. And a lot of people wonder why that they took this approach. Maybe that they were like thought he was getting too big for the company, which I don't understand, because they were okay with him getting a lot of the credit for these games, having his name everywhere. From what I understand, they brought him on to the Castlevania Lords of Shadow series. In what capacity, I'm not sure. Maybe asking his opinion on things. So if you didn't want him to become, if you didn't want him to maybe get too big of a head or feel like he was more important than the company, why would you ask his opinion on things like that? Why would you bring him in to work on your other main franchises? Maybe the new management just had beef with them. I don't know. But whatever it was, Kojima's gone now, and Konami, as of late, is attempting to earn the trust of gamers back and earn their money essentially again. But who knows if that'll ever who knows how that will go, seeing as how the only thing they've confirmed to be working on is new Metal Gear. I want to see, I mean, they have so many awesome franchises that they're not doing anything with. I want to see more Silent Hill. I want to see Castlevania. They own all the Hudson Soft properties, so I want to see a new Bloody Roar game. That would be sick. Bomberman, shit like that, you know. Hopefully all that stuff will see the light of day, and maybe much like SNK did when they sort of left the console game for pachinko, maybe Konami will get their heads out of their asses and come back and do what they're best at, or what they've been best at in the past, and make console games. Make Konami great again. So yeah, that's about all there is to say about Metal Gear Solid 5. Like I said, I played through a little bit of it. This is the one thing that I really had an issue with. And I guess this goes back to the controversy surrounding this game, is the voice of Big Boss. Throughout the series, it's always been David Hayter doing the voice of Big Boss and Solid Snake, and he has an amazing voice. He's like, Spetsnaz with a surprise. And I love his voice. He is that character to me. So when it was announced that Kiefer Sutherland was going to be taking over the role, I was extremely disappointed, extremely deflated. Now, having heard him in the game, it's okay. I kind of understand. Like, I guess Kiefer Sutherland, he's good stunt casting in a way for a big boss, but I just don't understand the move. I'd rather just have David Hayter back. Maybe they just wanted a bigger name, since to maybe attract more attention to this to MGS5. I don't know the reasoning behind it, but apparently they didn't even ask David Hayter at all. It's not like he wanted more money or anything like that. They just didn't even ask him. They just went straight to Kiefer. So I don't know what the deal was there, but it was really disappointing to say the least, for me anyway. But other than that, what I've played of the game so far, I actually really like. I had a lot of fun with it. I was getting into the story of it. So yeah, that's pretty much all there is to say about Metal Gear Solid 5. Let's go ahead and get this thing started.